Please help me with a warm welcome for Rocky Garza.
Let's make some noise for Rocky Garza!
Folks, if you don't know this gentleman, you better look him up while we're talking, while you're listening. I'd even pause and go Google him. Rocky Garza.
I think we got to be able to say these two things at the same time in the same breath, because I believe we live in this type of tension all of the time. I think we have to be able to say, I am wildly extraordinary and unique, and there is literally nobody in the world like me. The second statement is this: I am 100% regular, and I am no more valuable than anybody to my left or to my right. These are the two statements. One, I am wildly extraordinary and there was nobody in the world like me. And two, I am 100% regular in regards to the fact that you are no more or no less valuable than anyone sitting to your left or to your right.
So my wife, being amazing as she is, she said, if you could do anything with the rest of your life, what do you want to do? And I definitely didn't say this eloquently, but I like to believe that I did. And I said, if I could attempt to be an expert at anything in my life, I'd want to be a people expert. The reason you walked up to me and anybody else at the Moment Conference, it's not because Rocky Garza gave you a shot of confidence in the arm. It's because Rocky Garza reminded you exactly who you were, what made you valuable, and the fact that you were as equally as valuable as every other person in the room, speaker or no speaker. And I believe the hardest truth that many of us, myself included, we have to come to is that the stories written about us, the stories told to us about us, are a greater representation of the storyteller than they are of the character of the story.
One, I remember at the conference you had a game you played with everybody, and it was called the Upside Down Effect.
Yeah, so let's start with the first one. So let's do this. Will you be my participant?
Absolutely.
I want you to ask yourself two things. Number one,
this is a conversation that you need to hear. And I'm not just saying that so that you can listen to this episode. I'm saying it because I needed to hear this conversation. I needed to have this conversation. The questions that I was asking came full circle back to me. And I kind of became a guest in my own podcast, which was a little different. But these are conversations that we all need to have with ourselves. And what I mean by that is we all need to hit the subject of self-awareness, getting to know exactly where we want to go in life. What are we doing in life? The purpose behind what we're doing. And most importantly, we talk about the issues that we all face on a daily basis. And what I mean by that is social anxiety, anxiety in general, depression, loneliness, all these things that we all go through as a human. Please listen to this conversation with Rocky Garza. And more importantly, enjoy this conversation. If you're here in El Paso, Texas, Rocky's going to make a special visit to El Paso, and he'll be releasing all the details for it at the end of the episode, and it'll only be open for 15 individuals. This whole week, I was super excited to have you on the podcast, and there was a lot of people that I mentioned it to about, a lot of people that went to the conference, and they're super stoked to see this episode come out. I've actually had a couple of our previous guests leave us a question that they were probably thinking of wanting to ask you. So I have those questions saved to the very end, and I usually have a certain gig that I also play for a conclusion question. But before we get started with anything, I want you to introduce yourself, but introduce yourself in a way of letting me know where your journey really started. And it can go back to your childhood. It can go back to your young adult years. Just where did Rocky come from? What made Rocky the person he is today?
Yeah. Great. Well, number one, thank you so much for having me. I greatly appreciate the chance to be on the show with you. So, yeah, I mean, we'll go back to the beginning. I was born in Kansas, lived there about a week, so I don't really claim Kansas, moved to Dallas after that, moved to Texas. And then I've been in Texas the rest of my life. Or growing up, I went to 13 schools before I graduated high school. My mom was married. My mom and dad divorced when I was young. And I lived with my mom and or subsequent husbands. My mom has been married and divorced a few times, and we just moved a ton kind of growing up pre seventh grade. And I say that because for me at seventh grade, I moved in with my grandparents. I lived with my grandparents from 7th through 12th grade. But, I really kind of hone in on that time frame. That's that middle school, late elementary, middle school, high school time. Because I'm just a really a firm believer that whatever happens to us between the ages of 6 and 12, like the truths that we find to be true in our life are really clear indicators of how we operate as an adult. And so for me, that time frame was new school, new friends, new kids. Everything was new all the time. I didn't realize that the phrase the first day of school didn't mean the first day out of school until 7th grade. Like, I just thought the first day of school meant the first day in school, because it always had been my first day at a new school. And to me, that's really important, because I learned early on that if I could outthink you, outtalk you, I got out charisma you, out communicate you. That was the way I was building connections. That was the way I was finding ways to build relationships with folks. And I didn't know what I was doing because I was young, but I found really quickly, man, people really respond when you communicate. People really respond when you have the ability to use your words. And they can be used for good or they can be used for bad. I'm 40 now, so I've seen both sides. But I think in that, for me, I learned that really early on, that my voice was a really powerful tool that I had. Graduated high school, went to junior college for a couple of years, didn't know what I was doing, just trying to figure out something, ended up going to Texas A&M, graduated from there, went to a place called Sky Ranch, which is a summer camp out in East Texas. I was on full-time staff there for about 4 years, and then came to Dallas. I was on pastoral staff at a church for about 4 years. It had a great opportunity when I was working there. Really at that point, my wife and I had been married for about a year. We decided we wanted to start our own business. And so we started a wedding photography business of all things, which I know at this point makes perfect sense. But we started a wedding photography business. But for us, it was kind of our first jump into entrepreneurship, into personal branding, into, hey, let's try to figure this thing out for ourselves for the first time. And so wedding photography was it for us. And so we did that for about 5.5 years full time, shot 40 weddings a year, traveled the world. It was awesome. Didn't have kids yet. Found out we were pregnant with our son back in 2015. And really was like, hey, what we really want to shoot weddings the rest of our life. We're like, no, not at all. And so my wife, being amazing as she is, she said, if you could do anything with the rest of your life, what do you want to do? And I definitely didn't say this eloquently, but I like to believe that I did. And I said, if I could attempt to be an expert at anything in my life, I'd want to be a people expert. If I could find a way to take my life experience, if I could take 8 years of ministry, which I just define as deeply caring for people, if I could take 8 years of entrepreneurship, and if I could marry all that together and spend the rest of my life doing anything, and how could I help individuals unravel the stories that we tell ourselves so that we have the ability to live vulnerably and understand the freedom that comes along with being known? And how do I do that? How do I see that? And so that journey started back in 2014. So it's been almost a decade now. And over the last decade, and I've talked to thousands of people, I've coached hundreds of people, I've worked with companies, and really it kind of, for me, just kind of found some clarity on, I think I have the ability to help people understand who they are. I think every individual fully knows who we are. We just like the words and the language. And I think it takes an unbiased third party like myself to help extract out of you what you already know to be true, because until we can see it, we don't have any way to use it. And my belief, my role in this world is help individuals see clearly who they are so that they can take actionable steps to living a life of deep, deep purpose.
I love what you mentioned just right now. You said, if we can see it, we can believe it. And looking at your background, you have a sign that says, be confident. And the more that I see you motivate people, the more that I see you inspire individuals, you help everybody be more confident. You helped me be more confident at the Moment conference to go and talk to every speaker. I think I also went up to you. And it's a lot of the times we're scared to do that stuff. Was there ever a moment where you lacked that confidence? And I know you're big on that word confidence. Was there a moment where you lacked it and you were insecure about yourself throughout your life?
Today? I mean, here's the thing that I've learned, man. I really struggle with saying that you should listen to me because I'm an expert. But I very much believe that you should listen to what I have to say because I have experience. And I separate those two things because I have right behind me the sign that says be confident. That's a copy of my book, Be Confident. And people say, well, aren't you confident all the time? What do you mean you don't have confidence? What do you mean you have fear? What do you mean you have doubt or obstacle insecurity? You freaking wrote a book on confidence. Like, yeah, I did. You know why? Because I need to be reminded every single day that I need confidence. I need to be reminded every single day that I define confidence as simply as the ability to look at something and believe that it's good. That's what that's all confidence is. Confidence is the ability to believe something's good. Where we lack confidence, we no longer believe we are good. And so I haven't mastered. Do I believe I have a skill set? Do I believe I have tools and resources at my disposal to help me become more confident? Yes. But confidence is not something that you conquer and you never have another fear again. I battle it every single day. But I'm asking you to join me in the battle. I'm asking you to find the tools and use the right tool for the right thing at the right time. And if we are equipped with what we need, all of a sudden we get to begin to live proactively, because I'm not reacting to my fear. I am proactively addressing my fear because I believe who I am as an individual is good. And when I see goodness in myself, that I believe that's what gives us self-confidence, which allows me now to take the action I would not have taken before. The reason you walked up to me and anybody else at the Moment Conference, it's not because Rocky Garza gave you a shot of confidence in the arm. It's because Rocky Garza reminded you exactly who you were, what made you valuable, and the fact that you were as equally as valuable as every other person in the room, speaker or no speaker. Then you saw yourself and you looked in the mirror, literally or metaphorically, and you said, I am good. I am equally valuable as every other person in this room. And you know what? That I'm going to go up and I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to have a conversation with them. And I'm going to believe that at the core of who I am, it is good. And that is what confidence is.
What is probably one of the hardest truths that we tend to ignore? And that, I guess this kind of leads to the last question that I want to ask you, but I'm going to save it. But what is something that people tend to ignore a lot that they have to face the truth of it?
That the stories that somebody else told them about them are more about the person telling the story than they are the person they're talking about. Here's what I mean. My whole life, I've been told, Rocky, you're too intense. Rocky, you're too emotional. Rocky, you're too in people's face. You're so this, you're so that. You always this, you never this. You know who has told me you know who's never said to me, hey, Rocky, you're too intense? Somebody who was also intense. You know who's never said to me, Rocky, you're too emotional? Someone who was also emotional. You see, the only people in my life who have written a story about me that has made me feel as though I am less than is when somebody in my life, probably with good intentions, has communicated an insufficiency that they carry as an insecurity I should carry. And I believe the hardest truth that many of us, myself included, we have to come to is that the stories written about us, the stories told to us about us, are a greater representation of the storyteller than they are of the character of the story. Yet, we tend to hear the story that was written to us about us. We make it our own, and we bear the weight of everybody else's insufficiencies. We turn those into our insecurities, and we no longer believe that we are good.
Real quick, I want to cut into the conversation and say thank you to everybody listening right now, to listening to the conversations that we have with our guests, to following the podcast and being engaged with the podcast. I can't tell you how much that means the world to me and the team, for you to give an hour of your day to listen to these stories, to follow the podcast, to listen to these conversations. You can be doing anything else with that 1 hour, but for some reason you chose to come here and listen to these conversations. So I'm very grateful and thank you. This morning, actually, I was in the gym this morning, and I like to think about self-awareness a lot while I'm at the gym. And this morning I put out a post on what I was thinking about that morning. And it was mostly around social anxiety, and it was mostly about how people, and I had the discussion yesterday with an individual about how some of us tend to be introverted, some of us tend to go out there and talk to everybody. And what is the reason behind that, right? What is the reason behind social anxiety? And so my conclusion in that was probably because we're around the wrong people. And I like how you mentioned that about, we're always told these stories that, it's not even real. The more we're told it, the more we start to believe it. And so where do you think that social anxiety comes from? I've heard a lot of times from different talks about people aren't really depressed. People think they're depressed. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that people have these, I guess, kind of mental problems, but they're not really facing that? They're just implementing it into themselves.
Yeah, great question. So let me be very clear. I am not an expert in mental disorder and or how we operate. If you are or are not depressed, if you have or do not have anxiety. Now, I believe I have experienced the feelings that are related to depression. I believe I've experienced the feelings that are associated like anxiety. But I think when it comes to your question, you're talking about social anxiety. What about we get around people and we think, what am I going to do? If we're not talking about something that potentially has been diagnosed by somebody who's much smarter than Rocky, okay, we're talking about just general social anxiety that many of us Oftentimes, I find that social anxiety is driven by a belief of something that is going to happen that is yet to happen. Most things that we have the ability to at least address at a surface level around social anxiety is because we have already convinced ourselves of the story. We've already convinced ourselves of how the night's going to go, and we just got there. We've already convinced ourselves of exactly how the party is going to be, and we haven't even showed up at the party. I think we could relate social anxiety very similarly to maybe keynote speaking, maybe getting on stage or just giving a presentation, talking in front of people. That anxiety comes from many folks. They do that. I've been speaking for over 20 years, and I still, every time right before I walk on stage, I look at the audience and I go, hey, this is not going to work, bro. Like, this is a bad idea. They're not going to like it. Nobody wants to talk about their feelings, right? Like every time, no matter who the crowd is, every time I think this is not going to work. And then for me, here's a practical tool that I've used. Right before I go on stage, right before you go into a party, right before you go into a meeting, right before you go into dinner with friends, right before you go into that new thing to meet a new friend, you're just about to walk into the networking event. Maybe you're going on a first date. Maybe you're going on a fifth date. Any place where you're going to enter in the situation. And you begin to feel as though that there is a level of anxiety you are carrying. I want you to ask yourself two things. Number one, are you anxious because you have already convinced yourself of how the evening or day is going to go, and the day is yet to happen? If so, ask yourself a second question. Do I feel anxious about the story that is yet to happen because I feel as though I need to prove that I am worthy and valuable to be here? See, we use your example. I think we're talking about going to the gym and having social anxiety. A lot of people don't go to the gym because they feel social anxiety, because they feel stupid. They think people are judging them. They think that they're going to look down. They're not strong enough, fast enough, quick enough, in shape enough. And I understand. But I think that's because we've already convinced ourselves what everybody in the room is already thinking, and we're not even in the room yet. So if you find yourself in that position, here's what I do. I put my hand in my pocket. I know that can sound really simple, but I put my hand in my pocket because I remind myself that in my pocket, there is already an invitation to the party. I've already been invited. I already have my membership to the gym. I already have the invitation to the date. I've already been invited to the party. I got the evite. I replied RSVP, yes, +1. They've already invited me to the party. So before we walk in, let's not convince ourselves that we have to prove to everyone that we deserve to be there. Let's put our hand in our pocket and remind ourselves there's an invitation in our pocket because we have already been invited to the party because the people who are hosting the party decided that they wanted us there. And let's not write the story before it actually occurs. Let's give ourselves the opportunity to be fully present in the moment and write the story as it is occurring so that we give ourselves the freedom to not live with social anxiety in the sense that we have convinced ourselves about something that is yet to occur, but rather we are willing to remind ourselves with the simple trick. Put your hand in a pocket and feel for the invitation and remind yourself, friend, you've already been invited to the party. The only thing you have to do now is just show up.
There's a variety of questions that I want to ask you, and that's because I think as I'm hearing you talk, I am trying to reflect this on my own self. And I think the whole conversation, I think I want it to be about self-awareness because one, I remember at the conference you had a game you played with everybody. I think it was called the upside down effect, where you usually start with these 4 questions and you go backwards with it. I also went on your website and I downloaded the ABC method. And so I was looking at all that stuff, and it really teaches self-awareness. And me at 22 years old, I'm probably in that moment right now where I'm trying to know exactly who I'm hanging out with, where I want to go in life, what am I focusing on? Does it really matter to me if I'm focusing on this or not? What are my priorities? A lot of that I also got from previous conversations with different people that have my podcast. But I think what would you say, or if you can explain to me in your own way, that upside down method, and I think it was a very strong method to play, and also the assessment, the ABC method.
Yeah, so let's start with the first one. So let's do this. Will you be my participant?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's start with an easy one. So let's go. What do you think about most?
Well, to be honest with you, I still have my pieces of papers here from the conference. So I had my questions answered.
Great. Hey, listen. You can totally cheat. You can totally cheat. Just give me your off the cuff answer. What do you think about most?
So I that's actually still the same answer today. Is I'm always wondering, where am I really heading? What's really going to make me happy? And I guess that was one of the questions I was going to ask you later on, was what does happiness mean to you? But that's something that I always wonder myself, is what's going to truly make me happy, whether it's making the most money, making the least money, hanging around amazing people, hanging around myself. That's the biggest question in my head, is what's going to make me happy.
Okay. And so I think I'll flip the script on you for just give me a quick off the cuff. What does happiness mean to you?
I've come to realize that happiness to me is probably spending more time with my parents, with my family, being at home. That's something that I don't do as often. And I should be doing it, because you don't have your parents forever. You don't have your family forever. I think to me, happiness is actually laughter, having good times with people, going through moments that you forget about everything that's going on in life that could be wrong, and just living each moment. And I think for me, I'm figuring that out, that not the whole world, you can't fix everything. You can't be a part of everything. You can't, fix everything. I think to me, it's just, living those moments, those little moments.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to read to you what I feel like you said to me, and we're going to read it the way that you said it. I'll give a little description of the upside down, and then we'll read it the other way around. Okay. So I said, what do you think about most? You said, where am I headed? Then you said, am I happy? You defined happy. You said, am I spending time spending enough time with those around me? You said, I heard you say in the few words, am I letting my family down by not spending enough time with them? Am I laughing enough? Am I close enough to those that I love? And ultimately, am I living presently? Or am I constantly worried about what else is going to happen in the future? Or am I allowing myself to be present with those that I love right now? Okay. So what we walk through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we walk through 6 steps. I asked you, what do you think about most? You gave me one answer. And from that, we flipped it. We went through and we got 6 answers. Okay. Now, we did that because we asked ourselves, tell me about that. It's one of my favorite questions in the world. Tell me about that. What do you mean tell me about that? Yeah, tell me about it. What do you want to know? Yes. Give ourselves the freedom to dig and dig and dig. So what the upside down effect is we take something, we allow ourselves to answer it. When we feel like we're done, we take that and we literally flip it around upside down, and we read it in the opposite order we created it, to give ourselves a little bit more clarity about what it is we are actually thinking about. And I believe that actually gives us the ability to do something about it. If we stopped with, and there's nothing wrong with the question, what do you think about most? And I think there's nothing wrong with your answer that says, where am I headed? Great. That's a great answer. That's a great question. But that's not actually what you're thinking about. And if we can go to the upside down, we can get a much clearer picture of what it is you're really thinking about. So let's take your answers in the order you gave them to me. Then I'm going to flip it around to it, and then we're going to listen to it the other way. Okay? You said, where am I headed? Am I happy? Am I spending time with my family and those around me? Am I letting my family down by not spending enough time with them? Am I laughing with the people that I love? And ultimately, am I living with the people I have in my life while they are here? So I'm going to flip it around on you. What's the upside down? Well, if I were to say, hey, what do you think about most? This is actually what you think. What you think most about is, do you give yourself enough time to live presently and to soak in where you are right now, so that you can laugh with the people that you love and spend quality time with your family, to remind yourself that they are not let down, that you're actually enjoying the time you have with them while they are here. Because for you, spending time with other people and spending time with your family is something that makes you happy. And if you can live presently, have deep, meaningful relationships, and find that those in fact do fulfill you, no matter where you are going, then you'll always be headed in the right direction.
That does dig deeper. And what I'm thinking of now, and it's something I think I'm going to open up to, because I feel like there's not just me going through this, and I feel it's thousands of people going through this, is the feeling of loneliness. A lot of the times the more you progress and stuff, the more you do things, you feel more lonely. I actually met with one of my partners, and we were talking about this discussion about how, why not go out there and hang out with the friends you used to have? Why not go out there and go and dating, and why not go out there and party and things like that? And why not live that simple life, right? And so to me, I think it's, how would you how would you talk to somebody who comes up to you and says, hey, I'm feeling very lonely. I don't have much friends. I don't think I have a purpose with my life. What would you say to that?
I would say, tell me about that. But that's kind of a cheap answer because they're not here. But I just want to be clear. That's exactly what I would say if they said that to me. So two things. I feel like you asked me two questions. You asked me, number one, how do I help somebody, or what would I do for somebody that says they're lonely? Number two, what would I do with someone that says they don't have any friends? And I think those things are not mutually exclusive. You can be lonely with a ton of friends, and you can have a ton of friends and not be lonely. You can not be lonely and not have friends, so they're not mutually exclusive. You can have all or none. So we'll start with the first one. I feel lonely. So I think I would dig into more, and I think I would try to discover, do you feel lonely or do you feel isolated? Right? Do you feel lonely or do you feel isolated? Do you feel isolated or do you feel, right? And we kind of get ourselves into what is the thing we're actually feeling? Because I have times in my life where I have tons of friends, tons of community, people I meet with regularly, and I feel so lonely. And it's not a result of not having friends. I think for me, that loneliness is a result of that I have yet to be vulnerable with those around me. I think oftentimes loneliness occurs when we lack vulnerability. Because what happens is the only person we spend time with, really, really spend time with, present with, is ourselves. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. It takes vulnerability to be present with yourself. But extended periods of time with minimal vulnerability in our life leads to immense loneliness. And I believe that loneliness can lead to immense isolation. Because see, loneliness drives isolation. They're separate. They're not the same thing. But we can see if we just take a quick snapshot and we look around, think about the men in our life. And I'm going to use men. I'm going to pick on men specifically for a second. How many men do we know that spent 5 years lonely and then 10 years isolated? And then after that 10 years, it was like pulling teeth to get them to come back around. Those of us that are listening, specifically in our communities, how many of our fathers do we know spent the last 20 years lonely and the last 10 years isolated? How many of our fathers have tried really hard to say that they love us, but the only way they knew to love us was to go work harder? How many of us wanted to spend time and go fishing or hang out or just sit on the couch with our dads? But they couldn't, because they couldn't figure out how to be with themselves, much less know how to be with us. And I believe that's a result of our inability to know how first. And then once we know, to practice vulnerability with other men and allow ourselves the opportunity to be engaged so that we can fight the loneliness, so that we can avoid the isolation. Many times we don't have friends, and if not having friends is typically a result of isolation. We've convinced ourselves we don't need to be around people. We shouldn't be around people. We don't deserve to be around people. They don't get me. They don't understand me. I don't have time. I have things to do. I have a family. I'm trying to make money. What do you think you do? Money grows on trees. What are all the phrases we've used to tell ourselves at every age and every demographic?
Was there ever a moment you felt lonely, and how did you overcome that?
Bro. Yeah. Great question. Absolutely. I think I was lonely for the first 25 years of my life. I believed it was 100% my responsibility to take care of myself, and that I was unwilling to trust any person. I was unwilling to let anyone in. The phrase I always come back to is I recognized that I was really good at disclosure, and I was very bad at vulnerability. Meaning I was really good at disclosing information to you. I was telling you the same stuff I was telling everybody else. And I wasn't actually telling you anything real about me. And over time, man, that eats at you, because you begin to have this false sense of connection with everyone around you, because they all believe, because they just met you, that you're their new best friend. And yet, they actually don't know anything about you. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s and spent some time in counseling, and my wife and I did separately and together. We spent 4 or 5 years in counseling, and I led a couple of men's groups around the STEPS program and recovery, not specifically alcohol, but just recovery on life things and we've experienced, and did that for a few years. And then got into leading a community group for a few years, and then got into leading a men's group called Wiser Sons, and we're kicking that back off here really soon. And so I think I recognize for myself that in order for me to not be lonely, I've got to be surrounded by a community. But that doesn't just solve the problem, because I can't just show up to the meeting and not talk and expect to not feel lonely. I have to be willing to engage. Yes, I know it sounds crazy, but vulnerability is the exposure of ourself. It's the revealing of who we are to those around us. And it is crazy and it feels wild, and many of us have never practiced it, and it feels so awkward. It's like a baby giraffe walking for the first time. That's how it feels when we're in a group and we're expressing vulnerability and we've never done it. But without the ability to expose who we really are, then unfortunately no one's ever going to see us. But vulnerability is not simply the exposure of weakness, but I believe it's our greatest opportunity for growth. And to fight loneliness, to fight social anxiety, to fight isolation, to fight not having friends, to fight not knowing what to do. Man, it begins with our ability to learn and to practice to know ourselves and to see ourselves be vulnerable with those around us, so that we can expose the reality of who we are. We can confirm that who it is, that's the truth, and it can be affirmed that it is good. And from there, all of a sudden, now we begin to really dial into living a life we believe in, because every day we get to stand in the truth of who we are.
That's very, very interesting, because this morning, as I was writing down questions for this conversation, there's one thing you specifically mentioned right now that I feel like I've done this, and I take accountability for this, is, I would share my own 2 cents or my own piece of advice to friends of what I think about situations. And I would give them that utopia scenario, right? That perfect statement of how they can be better. But me, myself, not really believing that. This leads to this question that I wrote down, and I kind of want to read it to you word for word, because when I was writing it down, I was really trying to make it as detailed as I can to get the correct answer from you from this. And so the question was, the image that we paint for ourselves, the mask that we put on to please others, what would you say to these individuals who think that they have to look a certain way for others, leading them to have insecurities, anxiety, and live a quote-unquote fake life, even when it comes down to even social media? What do you think about social media? What do you think about people having to portray themselves to look a certain way for other people?
Yeah, I think that's a really dangerous game, is what I think. Now, to be clear, we're all guilty of it. No one is immune. No one doesn't have to fight it. Every human being I've ever met has some level of pride and some level of ego. I've never met a person who doesn't. So be very clear about that. We are all human, myself included. I think I would begin by asking myself, what do I believe I need to prove? Well, what am I trying to prove? What value or worth do I believe that I must have to be loved, that I feel like I must fake in order to be loved? And I know some people are going to hear this and they're like, loved, bro? Like me with the Ferrari that was rented on Instagram, it's not about being loved. I would beg to differ. What do you mean? Like me just making sure I have the right bag, the right shoes, the right clothes, the right belt, the red bottoms, whatever it is. I got to have the J's. I got to have whatever it is. I know it can feel a little far-fetched to be like, you're telling me that I only wear these shoes in public because I want to be loved, bro. I just like shoes and I want people to think that I'm fly. Okay, like I hear you. But if for some reason that's not you and you're doing it to gain the approval or credibility of somebody else, then we're doing it because we desire to be loved. We desire to be wanted. We desire to belong. We desire to believe that we have worth and value. And these things, for whatever reason, we believe are going to bring us value. I'm not telling you not to wear Gucci shoes. I'm not telling you not to get the loafers. I'm not saying don't wear the J's. I'm not telling you not to buy the 4s. I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't do or can't buy. That's not the point of the conversation. What I'm saying is that if you're doing it because you're hoping what's going to be allow other people to accept you, to appreciate you, to believe you, man, it's a slippery slope, bro. It's a slippery slope. I currently have on what I call my uniform, and I've recently discovered this. I have this shirt. It's from a company called Built, and they make a great long cut shirt. I like long shirts. I got some pants from Primo They're actually golf pants, but you wouldn't tell they're nice joggers. And I wear those, and I have a different pair of sneakers, and I wear that every day. It doesn't matter where I go. If I go to corporate, if I go online, if I go to a school, if I'm doing a conference, it doesn't matter. It's what I'm going to wear, and I'm going to wear that every day. I bought the same shirt. I like the way that it fits. It makes me feel good. It looks professional enough. I have 7 colors. I bought 4 pairs of pants in different colors. I have a few pairs of tennis shoes, and I'm going to wear that every day until I find something else that is just as good and just as simple. And I'm not going to speak at a conference and wear a sport coat, because I don't. I think you should. If you like it, you should wear one. I look like a douchebag when I put on a suit. I look like an idiot, like I should be a professor teaching classes. That's not who I am. It's not what I do. And so if I go to a business meeting and wear that, people are like, bro, what did you do? What happened? That's not me. That's not me. I got to find what's me. And if I show up someplace and they don't like it, that's okay. That's okay. But I'm not going to change who I am. I'm not going to change who I am so that you'll love me. I'm going to show you who I am, because I believe that I'm worthy and valuable of being loved.
I want to flip the script a little bit, and I want to ask you the question of, what do you think about the most?
Great question. Typically what I would say what I think about most is, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? Am I helping enough? Am I solving enough? Am I doing enough? I think in every category of my life, it's a reoccurring question I'm asking all the time. Sure, I have big dreams. Sure, I have big aspirations. Sure, I have high hopes of impacting millions of people in my life. The thing I think about most is, am I doing enough? And it's a dangerous place to be. It's a dangerous word to use, because who gets to determine that? Who gets to determine if it's enough? Who gets to determine whether or not it's sufficient? It can be a very dangerous, a very slippery place to go. And both, because I like the power of and for me, most days it keeps me moving. It keeps me driving. It keeps me. And this week has been one of the most difficult weeks of my entire life, professionally. I have experienced things that someday I'm sure I'll get to talk about and share a story about, and but it's been really hard, man. And I keep asking myself, did I do enough? Was I enough? Did I care enough? And most days, if I'm willing to be honest with myself, most days the answer is yes. Yes, Rocky, you did. What has begun to help me with that is for me to try to quantify, what does that mean? What is a realistic expectation on a daily basis that's enough? What is the real thing that I'm going to be able to do? And then to set myself up with a system that I can actually accomplish it so that I can answer that question. I hope when I see you again, I hope that if you ask me what I think about most, I hope someday my answer changes. But for now, that's typically what I think about most.
So I'm going to ask one thing, and then I'll have a lead-up question to that. What was your first job?
My first job ever, or my first job after college?
Like when you're 16 and it's your first job, when you're able to get employed, what was that first job?
Okay. Well, my very first job was actually every summer between 7th grade and my sophomore year of high school. I went to my aunt and uncle's house out in the panhandle of Texas, a really small town called Quanah. And they had a farm, and they had cows, and they had cotton. And I was a farmer. It was my first job. I irrigated cotton. I worked out on the ranch. I worked cattle. That's what I did. I was a cowboy for my very first job. And I did that every summer. I would say my first job that wasn't that. I did have a short summer stint as an employee or sales associate, if you will, at the Gap. And let me just tell you, I thought I was a superfly while I was an employee of the Gap for 2 months. But nonetheless, that was the first job where someone else gave me a paycheck. My first job though was working on the farm, working on the ranch.
Now the reason that I asked that is because as you were talking, you were saying that you hope you're doing enough. And so why I asked that is because what is enough to you? And also, why put yourself through these situations where, you may feel stressed, you may feel lonely, where you may have to feel like you have to provide so much for other people? Why not stay kind of like in that first job, right? Like a living a check to check or a salary base, stress-free.
Yeah.
Why do you think you have to do enough, and why not just go back to that?
Yeah, great question. Well, I think I've come to learn over the last decade that I personally believe that I am much more secure when I am pursuing making my own income than I am relying on a paycheck. I know you're wrong. There is nothing wrong with having a job and being a W-2 and having a paycheck every 2 weeks. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not telling you I think that's bad. I'm telling you for myself, I believe I am much more secure when I am in control of generating my own income. And I know everybody's not that way. I think because of that drives me to say, am I doing enough? I have high expectations. I have a high belief in what I have the ability to accomplish. And it's not constant. It's not out of 10 all the time. We spent a large part of our conversation today talking about that there are many times that I don't know. I don't feel it. I'm fearful. I have doubt. I have obstacle. I have insecurity, man. It's not just all unicorns and rainbows, right? Like there are days that are really hard. This week, man, has been really hard for me. And it's just one day at a time. It's going to be just 1 week. It'll just be a part of 1 month. It'll just be a part of this year. It'll just be 1 year. It'll just be 2 or 3 parts of a year. It'll just be 4 years. It'll just be a decade. And it'll just be a couple of decades. And one day, you, like me, in about 18 years or so, are going to wake up and you're going to be 40. And you're going to realize that a lot of the things you did in life, you did well. A lot of things in life that you wanted to do that you were a little fearful to do, you're going to wish you'd done. But most importantly, you're going to ask yourself, when you're my age, you're going to say, did I love the people around me? And did I do the work as early as I could to allow myself to be fully seen and known? Because the difference between 30 and 40 isn't just 10 years. It's the difference between 30 and 40 depends on what you do between 22 and 30. And if you're willing to put in the work to discover who you are in the next 8 years, your decade is going to come to you a lot faster than it came to me. And I really hope that it does. But it's going to require that you know yourself, that you look at yourself in the mirror and you believe that what you see is good, and that you're willing to take that and apply that and use that for good out in the world.
Do you regret anything from your past 15 years?
Mm. Do I regret anything? Yeah, I regret not buying more real estate 10 years ago. I regret that. No, man. I mean, off the top of my head, no, I don't have any regrets. Regrets are driven by shame. And I try really, really hard to fight against shame. That Brene Brown, who's a speaker and a researcher, she says that guilt says I did something wrong, and shame says I inherently am wrong. I'm defective. And I think shame is really dangerous. For me, this is not scientific. This is Rocky's opinion. For me, shame is equated to regret. If there was regret someplace, it's because I would have shame about something, and shame says that I am inherently bad. And I don't believe that. There are things that I'm guilty of. Let's be very clear. I am a human being. But I'm not shameful. I don't have shame. In our house with our kids, we try very hard to never shame them. I don't want them to feel ashamed. Embarrassed. That's okay. Guilty. Probably they're kids. They do all kinds of weird stuff. But ashamed. I don't want them to be shamed. So for me, no.
Earlier, you asked me what happiness was to me. I want to get your definition for 3 words. And it's the words we use mostly every day. We use so often. What is your definition of love? What is your definition of success? What is your definition of happiness, if you were able to define it?
Mm. Yeah. Okay. So you said first, love. What's my definition of love? I think I would define love as the ability to consistently pursue someone, be in relationship with them, and have the ability to recognize not only their full humanity, but also consistently hold in the other hand the fullness that makes them extraordinary, and be willing to walk with them through both. My kids, my family, my wife, my friends, those people that I love, I'm willing to look at the right side and go, man, incredible, awesome, unique, and look at the left side and go, and you're a human, you're going to mess some stuff up. And you know what? I take you either way because both are true and I can't have one without the other. So I'm going to accept both. To me, that's what love means. Happiness, happiness to me personally is a temporary thing. I think happiness is a great thing to have, but I don't think for me personally, happiness is something that I pursue. I would say that I'm probably pursuing joy more than I'm pursuing happiness. Happiness to me is fragile. It's very easily broken. Someone can rob it from me. I could use my words here the next 2 or 3 minutes, although I won't because I like you. I could use my words and I could make you very unhappy because happiness is fragile. However, I don't believe that I can steal your joy. Joy is something that lasts much longer. I've been in a very hard time and had joy. I've been very sad and had joy. Rarely, if ever, has happiness been the goal, and that I've experienced sadness and happiness at the same time. Never done that. So for me, I like to use the word joy, but I like words. And lastly is success. I think I would simply define success as constantly living out the pursuit of what I want. However you define that. Answering that question is one of my most favorite questions in the world. What do you want? It's such a great question because it's so open-ended and there's so many possibilities. But I believe the pursuit of what we want, that's happy. That's success.
There's one more topic that I want to talk about leading into that first word, love, is relationships. And I think for the most part, it is hard to find that one person who is going to be there with you throughout everything. Like, as you mentioned, somebody who's going to love you no matter what. What would you say to somebody, I guess? And I really don't have a question to this. It's more of just like somebody who's struggling with a relationship, again, going back to loneliness, maybe trying to find the right partner. How would you help them navigate through that, if that makes any sense?
I would say number one, you need to spend the next pick amount of time, 1 month, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is. You need to pick a time and a time frame, and you need to do nothing in that time frame but work on yourself. If you have experienced broken relationships, I'm going to say something that's really harsh. If you have had multiple broken relationships, you are the problem. I'm not telling you that you're the only problem. I'm just telling you that you're part of the problem. My marriage, I've been married 14 years. Is it perfect? Come on, bro. Is it good? It's pretty freaking good. But I believe it's pretty good today because my wife and I have both spent a lot of time understanding who we are as individuals and doing our best to come together as whole and complete as possible with very little expectation that the other is going to fulfill the other one. Great relationships are not 50-50. Great relationships are 100-100, as best and as often as we can get there. I'm not going to fulfill a hole in my wife's heart. That's ridiculous. She's not going to fulfill something in me that without her I can't have. That's crazy. However, both of us, really healthy, pursuing who we are fully as individuals, and committing the rest of our life to doing that collectively together, now that's a good relationship. And so if you're struggling with relationships, personal, professional, romantic, work on yourself. Work on yourself so that you can create a higher standard for what you're going for. But make sure that if you feel like it's not working, because there's no guys or there's no girls out there who meet your standard, make sure that you can meet the same expectation that you're having for everybody else.
If there's an answer to this next question, and I think these are the last two things that I want to talk about to conclude, because I know there's a lot of gems in this one, and I know you always leave a lot of gems in anything that you do and anything that you talk about. But what is something that has never been told about yourself, a story that's never been told?
A story that's never been told. I don't know, man. I tell a lot of stories. Let me think. We'll go back. I was about 20 years old. I was driving home. I'd left. I was working out of the summer camp for the summer. I'd gone home for the weekend. I was driving back out to camp. It was about 6:30, 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I was driving on the highway and I see this minivan in front of me. And we're kind of coming over this hill, going up over the top of the hill, and I look at this minivan, and all of a sudden I see the main minivan to the right just like disappear. And I think, that's weird. Like, did they exit? Did they, like, it just vanished. So I'm probably 300 or 400 yards behind them, and I'm driving on the highway, and I get up over the hill, and I look over to the right, and all of a sudden I see this minivan. It's upside down in the ditch. So I stop, and things like this happen to me all the time. I'm always the first person to wreck. I don't know why, but it happens all the time. So I pull over, and I get out on flip-flops. It just rained. It was muddy. My feet are immediately sunk in the mud. My flip-flops come off. I walk over to this minivan that's upside down. And I look at this minivan, and I kind of tilt my head over, and I look in the windshield, and I can see that there's 3 adults and there's 3 kids inside the minivan. So I try to get the doors open. The doors won't open. Everything's kind of jammed and crunched shut. Everybody seems to be generally okay, but they're all trapped inside the minivan. You can smell gas and such leaking. So I run over to my car. I get out the thing, a tire iron that, you know, take off your tires with. And so I run back over and I just start bashing the windshield, break the windshield out to get him out. So I go and break the windshield and get out. And so my mom gets out and dad gets out. My kid and the kid and the kid, 3 kids get out. And the last person to get out is the grandpa. Grandpa comes out and he's crawling out. And everybody's generally okay. They're banged up, but no major injuries. And grandpa comes out and he gets almost to the windshield. And then he turns around and he goes back into the car. And we're all yelling. I'm yelling, get out, you know, get out, get out, get out. Come on, you got to get out. And I can hear all the kids, you know, they're all yelling, you know, abuelo, abuelo, abuelo. And they're calling their grandpa, get out, get out. He goes all the way to the back of the car. I see him searching and scrounging, throwing stuff around. He grabs something, crawls back out of the car, and he gets out of the front windshield and goes and pull him over to the side, and he sits down. And inside of his jacket that he went back for, he pulls out a little Bible. And you could tell it's old, been around for a while. Pages are kind of crunched up. He sits there and he holds on to his Bible and he looks at me and he speaks a broken meaning. When I was yelling at him, you know, I'm from, like, get out, bro, why do you get out of the car? It's going to explode. Like, you got to get out. And he holds the Bible up at me and he looks at me. And he's, you know, he's visibly shaken, obviously. And he holds the Bible and he looks up at me and he says, life. And he looks at me again and he just says, like, life. Vida. Life. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what does he need? You know, like, God, he needs the Bible, he's alive, I don't know. I've thought about it I was 20 years old. So it's 20 years ago, 22 decades ago. I don't know what he meant. I don't know what it means. I don't know what it was. And I think about it a lot. It's a story I've never told before, that what happened with him and him being there. But I think he was on to something. And I think there was a reason that he was holding on to something that he believed was worthy of life. Maybe it was worthy of his life. Maybe it was worthy of other people's lives. Maybe he just knew that there was something significant, that he was just grateful to be alive. Nonetheless, I think oftentimes in our life, if we look at it metaphorically, there's going to be times where our car flips over in the ditch. It's not going to go the way we think. We're going to crash. We're going to have to break the windshield out to start over. But when we do that, in the midst of it being chaotic, in the midst of it being a crash, sometimes traumatic, let's not forget what it is for us, whatever it is, that brings us life. Because if we can remember that even when it's hard, man, when it's good, life will be so much easier.
Wow. That's very interesting to hear. And the way that he just said life, I mean, that puts you in a whirlwind of perspectives of what he really, really meant. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And so the last question that we have for you is a question that our previous guest left, not knowing who the next guest is going to be. And so the question that they left for you is, what are some of your life goals? What legacy do you want to leave?
Yeah, love that. So I write down every day that I want to build, live, and leave a legacy of care, curiosity, and conversation. That with my family, my friends, the things I want to leave is I want them to know me. I hope to create wealth. I hope to have money. All those things are awesome. But I really look at what's left. I hope at the end of my life that everyone who is close to me says that I not only left, but that I lived and I built a legacy of care for those around me, curiosity for those that I saw, that I interacted with, and the ability to be able to say, hey, like, what can I see and know and understand about those around me? So I would say that's kind of what I think about legacy for me. That's what it would be. And what was the first part of the question?
And what are your life goals?
Life goals. Yeah. Well, I got 10 things I write down every day. So I'll just read you a few of those things I'm currently writing down. Number one, that I love, care for, and serve my wife and my kids every day. I write every day that I play pickleball or golf twice a week with my friends. I write down that I take care of, when I say take care of, that's literally physically, mentally, spiritually, financially, both my parents, my in-laws, and my grandparents. I write that down every day, that I'll have the capacity and ability to do that with whatever it is that they need. Currently, I write down that I make $50,000 a month actively and $20,000 a month passively. I'm not there, but I would love to get to that place. I write every day that I'm abundantly wealthy and extremely generous. I write down every day that I do hard things for the most good, because I'm a wise businessman who cares deeply about those around me. I have a few other affirmations and goals that I write down every day. But for me, those are things I want to be reminded of, things that I want to see. I view my affirmations as a reminder of who I am, and I use my goals as a reminder of what I am doing and what I'm going to accomplish because of who I am. And I have 6 affirmations and 10 goals I write down on a regular basis. And sometimes those goals get accomplished and boom, we mark those bad boys off and we come with another one. And some of those goals on there I'm going to write for a long time. I write down that I'm worth $50 million in my life. How am I going to do that? I have no idea. But I write it down every day because it's something I want to pursue. And so my goals are not just monetary. They're not just about money or finances. They're all across the board. I have a goal that hits every single one of my affirmations. But my hope in my life is to make sure that I can challenge the stories that we tell ourselves and myself and those around me, so that we can experience the freedom that comes with living vulnerably. Because I believe being seen and known is amazing.
You hit the nail right in the head, because I was about to mention that. One, I mean, pickleball, it sounds interesting. I never really played pickleball, but I've heard so much about it, so that's awesome. But then the second thing was, I was about to mention that too. It's like the stories that, going back to the very beginning of the conversation, the stories that we're told, and why not tell our own story, right? So I love that you write that down and you create your own story and your own beliefs. I think that's something that everybody needs. Man, Rocky, you left a lot of gems here today, and you left me with a different perspective, as you always do. And I always watch like all your content and everything that you're putting out. I don't know if you ever saw it, or I never really even posted it, and it's also a part of Ruben. Ruben was telling me that you were doing that 30-day program. To me, I never posted it, but I actually started at the same time that you were starting it. I just never really posted it. But every morning I go to the gym at 5 a.m. and Daniel can testify to this. He's always giving me crap for being 2 minutes late. And so that's a challenge I tell myself in the morning every day. So
I want to make sure that everybody knew on this podcast, I wanted to announce it here first. If you're listening to this podcast right now, you are literally the very first to know. Here's what I want you to do. I need you to go follow me on Instagram, and I need you to shoot me a DM. And in the DM, I just want you to send me the word El Paso. DM me the word El Paso. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you first access to an event that I'm going to host in early November. It's going to be limited to 15 people only. 1-day event, full day, 10 hours. And we're going to do a deep dive into what I call identity mapping. It gives you the clearest language about who you are you've ever had, and allows you to see clearly what those things are, and gives you action steps to walk out moving forward, so you know exactly who you are as a person, what you want to do, and what you want to accomplish. And so you're hearing it here first. Again, if you're hearing you listen to this podcast right now, I have not put this on social. I have not shared it. I have not put it out on the web yet. No one knows except for you. Exclusively announced here first. Go to my Instagram and DM me the word El Paso, and it should automatically get you all the links and everything that you need. I would love, love, love to see you there. And I'd love to spend a day with you and helping you determine and figure out what is the clearest language about who I am.
Daniel, I want to bring you up now and see if you have any questions for Rocky that I may have missed, or that you might have caught on.
Man, I was left speechless. I have a few things that kind of hit home. You said at the beginning of the podcast that some of the most impactful years or time in your life or people's life is 6 to 12 years old. And I kind of think back to when I was 6. Probably don't remember much, but when I was close to 12 or a little bit older, It's probably most, the years that I remember, and it's kind of what shaped me out to be the way I am now. What would you tell, or, right, if, I know with society, the way I see it, well, kids nowadays are just a lot different than what I grew up, right? I used to go outside and we used to put a water bottle on our bikes to make it sound like a motorcycle and play cops and robbers.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's, doing the TikTok dance and all of this. What big difference can you see, yourself having kids and yourself, going through that state? What's a big difference right now for that impactful time that we say that 6 to 12? How can parents, I guess, help their kids through that stage, or how can a kid that feels overwhelmed in that time period, how can they navigate?
Yeah, great. Great question. And I'm going to just tell you some things I'm trying at home, and we'll see what happens. But, for me and our family, so number one, my kid ain't getting a phone until he can buy that thing himself. So my kid's ain't getting a cell phone until he's 17 or 18. He doesn't need one. There's no reason. You want to find me, call me. I can get you a watch. I can get you something. You can ding me, ping me, call me. You can do something, but you don't need a phone. That's me personally. I don't need a phone. I wish I didn't have to have a phone. As a matter of fact, I've been thinking about getting rid of my phone. And the reason I say that is I go outside. I mean, I have a really good friend of mine. His name is Caleb. I think he's an incredible father. He inspires me a ton. And I remember him telling me when his son was about 5, my son was just turning 2. And he said, I made a commitment to my son when he was born. He told me this. And he said, I'm going to continue to do this the rest of my life. He said, I'm telling you for accountability, but I want to encourage you. He said, anytime my son says, Dad, can we go outside and play? I'm going to say yes. I don't care how tired I am. I don't care what I'm doing. I don't care what I've been doing. I don't care how exhausted I am or what it is. If my son has to go outside and play, then my response is going to be yes, always. It's amazing. He's 14. He plays baseball. He doesn't have a phone. He's not on TikTok. He's an incredible athlete. He works out with his, he has friends. They hang out. They're face to face. I think he's done a wonderful job as a father, and his wife as a mother and parenting their child. I look at my kids and I think, for one, what can I do and to be impactful? Get outside and get face to face. Get outside, sweat, run, climb a tree, fall down, hurt yourself, scratch your leg, get bitten by an ant, let a bee sting you. Like, get out there and do some things, because that's where life is out there. Secondly, get face to face. Like, I love right now, our house is the house that kids come to. And I love it. We have a group of friends that we see for coffee every Saturday. There's about 15 of us. They get coffee at the same coffee shop. And there's always 1 or 2 kids that every Saturday, no matter what, here they come. And, hey, can we go home with you? Can we ride home with you? Can we go play at your house? And every time my answer is going to be yes, because I want my kids to get outside. And I want my kids to get face to face. They can follow whoever they want to follow when they get older. There's plenty of people out in the world that they don't know who they can see, who they can aspire to be. I think that's awesome. But while they're here, while they're at this stage, I want them to aspire to be people they can see face to face. They can see, they can touch, they can feel, they can be around, they can understand, they can watch them get mad, they can see them be happy. But I think face to face, I think proximity and relationships, I think being outside are 2 of the things that have the ability to help form where we are, who we are, and especially our kids in that time frame. As adults, we can see the effect. We see the effect of being privy to information from around the world that has no direct impact on us, but it directs us impactfully. We consume information that we cannot control. I want to do my best to make sure that my kids are consuming things that they can control. They're participating in things that they can feel, and there will be enough time in their life they can get online later.
That is a great response. That kind of leads me to a follow-up in that. I see a lot of this, right? I watch a league, or I'm with friends, and we're at the park, playing basketball stuff. But we see, for the parents, right, the simplest solution is, by the phone. And then it almost seems like it becomes a dependency. Like, they become dependent of that. How, as a parent, right, how can one pull away from that, right? And your kid's so dependent on that phone, so dependent on the iPad, on TV, right, with Coco Melon and all this stuff that's for that. How does one kind of redirect that attention out of that, device into, like you said, spending time outside, or getting out of that? How does one do that?
Yeah. Well, let me be very clear. I'm not here to tell any parent how they should or should not parent. I'm not here to tell you how to get your kid off the iPad. That if you like it, you like it. I'm not here to judge you or tell you that it's wrong. So I want to answer your question in regards to how you asked it to me with my family, not trying to tell anybody else what they should do for their kid. Look, sometimes you just got to have an iPad. Let's start with that. Like sometimes you just got to keep them entertained because you're tired, you're exhausted, you don't have the energy. You're out to eat, you're out to dinner, you're trying to have a conversation. I have a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old talking. Don't stop asking you questions. Sometimes, you know what? Just watch Cocomelon, bro. Watch Cocomelon and don't talk to me so I can talk to your mother and we can be two human beings and enjoy our fajitas. So let me be very clear. That happens. It's going to happen because it's a real thing. Your question was, however, how do we prevent that or how do we engage that in a way? So number one, man, we got to teach our kids how to be bored, and we got to teach them what to do when they're bored. Like being bored is awesome. Being bored is one of the best things. If you're bored, that means you have exhausted every resource that you have, and your brain is now free to think in a way that is open and free. But you got to learn how to be bored. You got to learn what to do with boredom. A really good friend of mine named Kyle Steve wrote a children's book called "What to Do with Boredom." Printable book. So if you're a parent, check it out. You can get it on Amazon, I'm sure. But like, what to do when you're bored? Like, because being bored is awesome. Man, games. You have I'm Tree. That's the first kids that were bored tied 2 cans together. They called it a telephone, and they put it across their house. They thought they could hear each other when in fact they're just talking to a can. Like, boredom is awesome. But for us to allow our kids to be bored and to really work through it, well, as parents, we've got to be in a place that we've been bored. We allow ourselves to work through it, and so. There's so many things in my life, dude. Kids are an incredible mirror to ourselves, especially as parents. And so when my kid says, "Dad, I'm bored. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to," man, I got to pause for a second. Go, where did he get that from? And how am I reflecting that? It's as an example, in the last 3 or 4 days, my son who's 7, every day he said, "Dad, we're going to work out. We're going to do some push-ups. Hey, Dad, can we do some squat? Hey, Dad, did you work out today? Should I work out today?" And I know it's because I get up in the morning, I get up early and I'm going to the gym at about 5:30, or I go play pickleball at 5:30. And every morning when I come home, I wake him up to get him ready for school, get him out of bed, and I'm sweaty. My shirt's sweaty. And I said, "Dad, why are you, it's 6 in the morning. Why are you sweaty?" I've been working out. It's amazing now. Every morning at the bus stop, he rips off 5 or 6 push-ups before bed. He said, "Dad, can we start doing 10 push-ups every night before bed? Can I do some squats? Can I?" He's just watching, man. He's just watching. The kids are just watching what we're doing. So I'm not telling you that you got to be mindful of everything you do because they're watching it all. I'm just telling you got to be mindful of everything you do because they're watching it all. And I think that's a way that we help our kids in those spaces. Is we have to be able to reflect ourselves.
I think you personally gave right on, the nail on the head with that. And then, I mean, there's so much stuff you said that, it's just so impactful. I think one of the things that you talked a little bit with Isaac about, which is the asking the definition of the 3 words. And I have with my wife, I have this ongoing thing, right, with her that when I was in school and stuff like that, I had a professor or teacher that I would tell him something, and out of the conversation, he'd be like, "Can you define that word for me?" And he would ask me to define words that I would use. And it taught me that sometimes we feel like we know how to use a word and not really understand what it means. We hear a word on TV or something, and we heard it in the sentence, and we pick up and start using on it, and then we never really know what the word means. With, you said love. Those 3 words you said: love,
Love, happiness, and success.
Love, happiness, and success. And I really like the explanations you gave me for them. And you think now, one of the big things that I've heard in a podcast is that with kids and adults as well, you make a mistake and the person that comes to your head is to say, "Hey, I'm sorry." And you don't really do anything to actually change what you did, or it's just kind of like a reflex thing. Wow, you say "I'm sorry" or "I'm sorry," and you forget about what you did, and then you do it again, and it's just like the word that's in the podcast I said that it's lost its meaning, or it being used. With everything nowadays, how would you try to phrase this correctly? But with things being just thrown out there, words and all types of things, how does one really and truly, how can people really and truly, obviously by showing, but how can one truly show, like I said, happiness? How can one truly, show the love or demonstrate that? Like, how can you add that value of what you're saying back for that word or that phrase that you're so commonly useful to using?
Yeah. No, I think I follow you here. So we say things like "I love you." We say things like "I'm successful." We say things like "I'm happy," or we say things I'm this. What do we? Yeah, it's great. It's great to define it, but like, what are you actually doing for it, right? Like, what are you actually going to do about it? I think pick any one of those words. Let's go with love. That's one that you said. How do you show someone that you love them? Well, I think number one, you accept them. You allow yourself to go, hey, are they a human? Because I'm pretty sure I'm a human. Are they a human? Because if so, I accept them for who they are. I got to be able to not just accept it, but I would be willing to engage in that, right? Like, I want to be able to show you I love you by listening, being curious, by participating, by being present. We say vulnerability requires two things: invitation and proximity. You want to show somebody that you love them, be vulnerable. You want to be vulnerable, create an invitation, invite them into vulnerability. You want to be vulnerable, create proximity. It's really, really hard. The next time you're in a fight with someone that you love, get about 6 inches away from their face and put your hands on their face and see if you can stay mad. Because the last time you got mad at somebody you loved, you turned your back, you walked away, and you yelled at them when you couldn't see them. Try getting 6 inches from their face, your hands on their face, and see if you can still yell at them. Because vulnerability requires proximity. And when you invite someone to put their hands on your face, you will see how quickly you are no longer mad. Do things you haven't done before. We do them the same thing over and over and expect a different result. Same entity. You want to show somebody you love them? Take action. Do something you've never done. Put yourself in a position to be vulnerable and watch what happens.
Rocky, thank you so much for giving me your time. Thank you so much. I mean, you could be doing anything else and you could have, not done this podcast, but, I really appreciate it. And I really, really admire your time and the time that you took to share your story and everything. So just from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate both of you. Thank you so much for having me on. Let's do it again. If we get more questions, let's do it again. We get to El Paso, let's do it again. Let's record one live, face to face, man. I'm all in. I so appreciate your support, everything you guys have done, and really look forward to working together again soon. I want to make sure that everybody knew on this podcast, I wanted to announce it here first. If you're listening to this podcast right now, you are literally the very first to know. Here's what I want you to do. I need you to go follow me on Instagram, and I need you to shoot me a DM. And in the DM, I just want you to send me the word El Paso. DM me the word El Paso. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you first access to an event that I'm going to host in early November. It's going to be limited to 15 people only. 1-day event, full day, 10 hours. And we're going to do a deep dive into what I call identity mapping. It gives you the clearest language about who you are you've ever had. It allows you to see clearly what those things are and gives you action steps to walk out moving forward. So you know exactly who you are as a person, what you want to do, and what you want to accomplish. And so you're hearing it here first. Again, if you're hearing, you listen to this podcast right now, I have not put this on social. I have not shared it. I have not put it out on the web yet. No one knows except for you. Exclusively announced here first. Go to my Instagram and DM me the word El Paso, and it should automatically get you all the links and everything that you need. I would love, love, love to see you there. And I'd love to spend a day with you and helping you determine and figure out what is the clearest language about who I am.
If you like this conversation, make sure you guys follow the podcast on Apple and Spotify. Make sure you guys subscribe on YouTube. And if you know of any guest who would be a good fit for our podcast, please send me a message. And most importantly, I hope that you take something out of this podcast to put into perspective in your life and maybe help guide you through the journeys that you're facing right now. So thank you.